So I'd like to welcome you all for being here. I'm Cheryl Carson, the Associate Executive Presbyter for Central Florida Presbytery, for those who may or may not know me. We're excited to have with us the Reverend David Keck, who's going to be leading our presentation today. And I think it was the Holy Spirit moving that brought this all together. Dan had mentioned, our executive presbyter, about David's book being used to help relationships in congregations in other presbyteries. And so we got to talking about it and thought, well, heck, David is in our presbytery. He's the chaplain at Embry Riddle, Aeronautical University in Daytona. And we thought, well, why not have him share his expertise with us? And so just a little background. David, am I right that you're actually from Canada?
No.
No?
No.
Where do you hail from?
Grew up in the South and went to school in the Northeast. So if you go by where I survived acne, I'd say Connecticut. But if you go by sports loyalties, I'd say Atlanta.
And wow. I see from your bio that you've served congregations in North Carolina and Virginia. Mm-hmm. And he's served on committees on ministry in 2 different locations. Mm-hmm. And the foundation for this workshop comes from a book that he authored called Healthy Churches, Faithful Pastors, Covenant Expectations for Thriving Together. And he's also got other books that he could tell you about, or at least one more. And you may have noticed from his picture that was on the website that he enjoys playing the harp and watching football. And as he put it, not necessarily at the same time. So David, welcome. And I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm honored that you've taken the time. Cheryl and I were talking a little bit earlier about how the new circumstances are creating different possibilities and opportunities for conversations and discussions and sort of continuing education moments within the life of a presbytery, or connecting actually with someone from Nigeria, which is great, just the new opportunities and possibilities. So do want to honor your time and thank you, and I want this to be meaningful for everybody. Let's begin together with the prayer. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the promise that where 2 or 3 or more are gathered in your name, that you're with us. So we claim that promise now. We thank you for all the work you do in our communities and our own lives. Guide us now. Help us to be inspired by your hope and by your love, and help us be strengthened in our faith and our trust for you. May the work we do this afternoon be part of your work in the world. May we continue to be faithful congregations, serving you, glorifying you, and proclaiming your good news. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Could I say one housekeeping thing? If you don't mind keeping yourself muted until David invites us to enter into conversation. Sometimes if there's background noise, it will show up. And so I would ask that you do that. So
how do you do that?
So do you have you're on an iPad. Who's familiar with iPads?
Oh, I got it.
Oh, did you find it? Okay, good. All right.
All the new ways of doing things, right? And so whether it's a prayer via Zoom or figuring out how to turn on and off the microphones, it's all quite different. And so on the one hand, it is, as we were saying a little bit earlier, this kind of moment where we can get glimpses into each other's lives, you get glimpses into what's on each other's walls. And I think it was Omar had his cat, I've got my dog here. And if I'm doing this, it's because Milo is in a moment of need. So this moment we are being church, and we're being church in our homes and being church together. It's just a very different kind of experience.
Davis, Julia, Larry, Robin.
Sean, would you mind muting for us? Welcome.
There we go. Thanks. Yeah, so it's different experiences. At the same time, things also endure. We are congregations, faithful folks seeking to do God's work in the world and in our own communities, and there are things that endure. So I want to be mindful of the fact that while I'm sort of taking the lead presenting here, um, I'm going to guess based on the images I'm seeing on the screen and what I know about folks, there's a lot of experience in the Zoom chat. A lot of folks that have been in different congregations, different settings. And so let's try to learn from each other. We've actually got kind of a nice number. If we get more, that's great, but it's a nice number because at least we can all see each other's faces. I think with Zoom, sometimes you get to 25 and you have to scroll. So we can all at least see each other's faces, but I think it'll be nice. Let me just get a sense of, first of all, get a sense of who's here in the gathering. If you're, if you, on the bottom of your screen or your window, you should have a reaction button that allows you to either make a clapping hand or a thumb up or something like that. How many folks here, if you can give me a thumb up or a clapping hand, if you're a ruling elder? How many ruling elders do we have with us today? So, okay, several ruling elders, okay. And teaching elders, would that be everybody else, or teaching elders give a thumb up? Okay. So it looks like a little bit more on the teaching side, but also ruling. So one of the great things about our church is we have officers who are laity as well as clergy, and it's amazing strength. And any deacons currently serving in a diaconal? People may also have been deacons as well. Okay. So I'm just grateful for the work that folks do, and I'm really grateful that you guys are here. So let me, so it's good to get a sense of what's here. Why don't, let me give you a couple thoughts about the book and what I would like to propose to do today. And then after that, I'd like to hear from you what you'd like to get out of today. And again, we're a small enough group that we can kind of, if there are particular things we want to discuss, we can do that. And then I've got some things I want to do together, but also want to be responsive to your needs and what brings you here. So the book I wrote, and I'll try to do the shared screen thing. And again, where's the 14-year-old when you need them?
It's down at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah,
save bar as your reaction.
Yep. There we go. Yeah, I'm just getting to make sure I got the right thing up. Okay, so here is the book. I hope everyone can see that okay. And the idea is it started out with relationship between congregations and pastors. At very beginning was asking pastors, colleagues, what do you need from your folks to be better pastors? Just a real simple question. And I wanted to know, just because it's real clear that in a community, we have pastoral leadership, we have officer leadership, but so much depends on who's there. I mean, people talk about the fishbowl, depends on what's the water and who else is swimming with you. So I wanted to know what pastors needed, and I was just asking directly, what do you need? And the conversations evolved from there, and I started to talk to lay people as well. I said, so what do you need from your pastor to thrive as a faithful Christian? And it evolved with this dynamic of healthy churches, faithful pastors, thinking about what it means to be a covenant community together. And say I chose healthy churches in the sense of thinking about sort of social health and ability to communicate, which isn't to say that pastors are or not healthy. And I chose faithful pastors as a sign of a theological responsibility for preaching the word, and so the sense of faithfulness that comes from attending to God and being set apart in ordination. It's not to say that churches and lay leaders are not to be faithful. Anyway, I wanted to combine the two, and I wanted to provide a way for people to have conversations together about what it means to be in a covenant community glorifying God. And it started out with a simple question, and the answers, as I started getting back from people, ended up focusing on the sort of expectations. And the example I like to use is from a friend of mine. Said, I got 100 members in my church, and I got 100 expectations for job descriptions. And he just said it like that. And he's a good old boy and just a loving, faithful pastor. But he was just up against the fact that Mr. So-and-so and Ms. So-and-so and Ms. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so, et cetera, all had a little different sense of what he should be doing. And he wasn't able to get beyond the fact that all these different needs that the community had. So as the book evolved, I wanted to, the thinking evolved, so let's just focus on expectations. Let's focus on helping congregations and pastors have clear discussions around what they expect from each other. And it's just something as simple as, again, to use an example I like to use, it's Friday afternoon and you are the pastor and you know you've got work to do on your sermon and you know you've got responsibility for checking in with folks in the congregation with visitation of some form, and whether it's virtual or not. So what do you do on your Friday afternoon? And it's about priorities and about setting those priorities and knowing what your responsibilities are. And it's very easy to get to the point where you want to do both. You want to preach a good sermon and you want to visit with folks who are a little bit lonely or maybe are dealing with something in their life, but you have to choose one. If you've had a conversation with the congregation about what their expectations are, what your expectations are, it gets a lot easier. If the congregation has said, we really, 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 really want to prioritize visiting the shut-ins, well, that'll tell you what to do on Friday afternoon, right? And if the congregation really says, Pastor, you focus on worship, we want to be fed by the word every Sunday, that's our most important thing. We've got deacons and elders working with organized committees for visiting people, focus on preaching. Again, that makes your life a lot easier. So what I've just said, I think probably resonates with a lot of communities. And it's pretty obvious, I think. And my point as I talk to people is, well, if it's obvious, why doesn't it happen more? And so that's where I went into the way of how do you promote conversations and discussions about what the expectations are. And so as I developed the thinking, I said, okay, if there's this sense of within congregation pastors, there are lots of good things you can do, not clear who needs to do it, how the pastor should prioritize his or her work, how do you have the conversations? So see if I can share screen again successfully. So as I went through, I kind of structured it in the introduction, what it says, I think everyone wants a healthy, vibrant church community. And okay, that's again pretty obvious. Maybe not. I know there are contentious issues. I've been on 2 committees of ministry, as Cheryl said, and so I know that not everything is sweetness and light. And I'm Presbyterian, so I do believe in the power of sin. That said, I believe, generally speaking, if folks are showing up, they want a healthy, vibrant church community. So then I want to talk about shared expectations with folks and sort of principles and guides, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then I have what congregations can expect from faithful pastors and a notion of what it's like to be a pastor. And that was one of the things that came up, that a lot of conversations from pastors, what I was hearing from pastors were, folks just don't know what it's like. And that makes a difference. And it's in terms of providing support or providing clarity. The number of pastors I talk to just talk about how hard it is to put their head on the pillow at night because they care so much for their people and they're praying for them and they're listening to their stories and they're doing whatever they can to help address issues in their life. That, as you folks know, right? You can start lifting people up in prayer and you start taking them in sort of this deep sense of love and hope. It's harder and harder sometimes to get to sleep. And so pastors, that pastoral life of love and service, which all Christians are called into, is praying for them. I'm not singling that out, but I think you know what I mean. A lot of people just don't understand that. And so I wanted to try to find a way for lay folks to have a better glimpse of what it's like to be a pastor. That's what focused on here, looking at the congregation being able to expect from the pastor theology and worship and focusing on God. And I'll come back to why I think that's important. Self-knowledge and self-care, pastors practicing what they preach, and all of us who are guilty about not doing that, please raise your hands. Thank you. And sort of modeling healthy servant leadership and serving so others can lead, and sort of who's, if you're overdoing it or not. And so obviously this is going to be based on language around mutual ministry and equipping the saints. And that passage from Ephesians is sort of, that's that image I have there. Then I talk about what pastors can expect from congregations, and it's really about cultivating a great pastor, looking at mission and ministry, structure, support, those kinds of things. And then sort of looking ahead with some specific input, et cetera, et cetera. So what I wanted to try to do is give people, as you saw from the other section, I'm not sure, did you see me switch over to a different window, or you can see that now? It says healthy congregation. Yeah, okay. So I came up with a series of, the chapters are all based on these short sections, which Cheryl sent out to you, with a expectation statement, a quotation from someone like Craig Dykstra, who's written sort of formally in the life of the church, a real short, very basic discussion about the topic. Scroll. There we go. Something I thought could be rateable. You could Xerox this, hand this out before a session meeting. And then I have these figures called these 6 composite figures. And they are folks who represent the voices of people I talk to in the interview process. And they're composite figures, and because certain people were saying certain things a certain way. And so I ended up putting them in, kind of giving them voice by these composite figures. But then I also want congregations and pastors to ask, to say, where do you find yourself in this? Okay, maybe you find yourself as the young pastor who reflects on the time when she was in seminary and discovered how art and music helped shape her ability to read the Bible. And so maybe you're the lay leader like Lisa or Ed. And these are distinctive voices, all taking a perspective on the general expectation. And then the expectation concludes with a simple self-assessment. At my church, this expectation is everything from not discussed to we've been talking about it, we're in good shape, to, and then not practiced, widely practiced is not applicable. So the structure of the book really is around these sections of discussions of expectations. And the just simple structure of here's a expectation, a little bit of reflection, some different points of view, and the self-assessment piece. And I chose that because I wanted people to have a tool that they could use. You don't have to use the whole book. You don't have to buy the whole book, but feel free to, don't let me stop you from buying the whole book. I wanted something that could be used in congregations. And my heart for communities and churches I work with, people are tired, they're working hard. Session members are spending so much of their time in the life of the church. The last thing they need is a 500-page book. What I wanted was something that was short and accessible, and people could get a glimpse, get some framing, and hopefully find themselves in there in one of these figures or in the discussion, and then have a conversation together. So last thing I want to say before I want to put it up to you, your expectations for today, talk about expectations, is I think that my approach in this, and what I'd like to suggest for us today and suggest for you and your congregations, is to be really, 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 really wonderfully naive in the best sense. And why do I say that? I don't know what the experience in the Zoom room is, but I'm guessing we've probably been in a variety of situations. Some have been great congregational settings. Some have been pull your hair out situations. We may or may not be enthusiastic or optimistic. We may be caught in the middle of a struggle in our own setting. But God's at work, and the Holy Spirit is at work, and that power that God gives us through love is, well, it's overcome. It's overcome everything. So I would like to be naive, and by that I mean, let's be our best selves. Let's ask people to be our best selves. There are things we don't want to talk about that are awkward to talk about. They have to do with finances or conduct of a pastor or a lay leader. It could have to do with a personal issue that somebody's having that really is affecting the life of the church. I don't know if you've been in those meetings too, where the topic is about to come up and you see everyone's faces and they all go, no, and just, it doesn't come up, but yet they need to talk about it. And again, sort of in the COM experience, you visit a congregation and you see everyone's saying, don't talk about this, don't talk about this. You know, you need to talk about it. So, but people don't. And so my approach is to try to create a structure that says, look, let's trust in God's love, let's trust in God's power, let's trust that, yeah, we're all sinners, we all make mistakes, but we can have this conversation. And I call that naive because sometimes that is, and sometimes we get stuck and we don't want to talk about things. So I would just like to suggest at the outset, as we think about expectations, let's trust that God's at work and be prepared to have those tougher conversations. So let me pause there and see either if you want to use the chat box and type things in the message, or if you want to just unmute your mic. And I think we're small enough. I don't think we're going to get in each other's way. But if you want to just say what is something you have, what are expectations that you have for the day, and or something you'd like to make sure we touch upon or are able to help with. Again, I can't promise everything, but let's see what we got. Why are you here?
Well, I'll start, David. I think it would be one of the things I'm hopeful, based on your book, maybe if you can give us some practical hints of how we start engaging in these kind of conversations, since as you point out, it's kind of awkward maybe sometimes to think about addressing some of those things, but if they manage to get to the surface and blow up, then it's an even worse situation, or there can be misunderstanding. So if you can give us some practical hints on how to actually facilitate those conversations, maybe between the session and the pastor, those kinds of situations.
Okay, great. So practical way to start.
I would echo that. I'm always looking for more strategies for how to get people to talk to one another. That is a common shortfall that I discover, and a lot of times when I'm dealing with the situations where there are concerns, there's a reluctance to talk about it where it needs to be talked about, and there's a lot of conversations that are going on in places where the conversations should not really be happening. There's a reluctance, if not a fear, to discuss it in the session meeting and clarify what the expectations are.
David, I don't know if you're viewing the chat or if you want me to kind of keep an eye out for it and lift up. Omar had posted in the chat, and I don't know, Omar, if you want to speak to it or you want me to just read what you wrote. So.
Yeah, I'll speak to it. Basically, in the COVID-19 environment, there's been some fundamental disagreements that I've come across. For example, staff, either volunteer or paid staff, who have chosen not to come back, let's say, to musicians, and the two parties have made their positions clear, but it doesn't sit well. The folks, they just can't say, okay, this is the new arrangement that we've come up with. There is a resentment that continues to color the conversation and cause hard feelings because someone may have chosen to take a certain factors into their decision that others just don't disagree with. So that's a COVID-19 question, and it would also run into even things like decisions about how particular how the church might approach other areas. So let's say keeping the office open for in-person traffic and not, and the session may not be at a consensus on the chosen decisions.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. Can I also ask just along these lines, you may also have some other things you want to focus on as well, but on this point about sort of changes that are brought out, or more challenges, strains, stresses, even conflicts around COVID-19, is that happening across your congregations and your communities? That's a particular example you have there, but I'm wondering in general, is this how many folks are coming here in part because you're feeling a new set of stresses on top of existing ones because of COVID-19. General thoughts on that?
David, I think that it is an underlying issue in many of our congregations about concerns about handling it one way or another, but people, at least it's my observation, that people are not giving credit, our lay folks are not giving credit to that being a serious issue that is contributing to anxiety and increased tension. Their focus tends to be on other things, but I think it's an underlying issue that is underneath it all.
Okay. And Tendra, do you mind if I kind of put you on the spot just a little bit? I think this is really important, and this also, Omar, certainly feel free to join in as well on this question. So, yeah, I think it really is important as we think about this. What are those underlying anxieties? How would you characterize yourself? Are you smooth sailing? Are you feeling the tensions? Are you? And I hope you don't mind me doing this. I think it's helpful as a way. I want to address the practical piece, and I think part of the answer is right here.
I'm in a kind of perfect storm situation because I'm new. I came just a few months before we had to shut things down, and so I'm the first female pastor in this church. I'm new, and we have the virus. And I have a fairly strong personality. So all of those things together have made it challenging. So no, I would not say that things are smooth sailing for me. But I think there are lots of reasons for that. Lots of things that can point to why it's not smooth sailing.
Yeah, and I lift it up because I think a part of the leadership in these kinds of moments where we have the tensions between, you can have sort of the tensions between sort of concerns for health, concerns for the economy, concerns for individuals. There's so much unknown, so much uncertainty. Our language is insufficient. So, for example, I just got a COVID test today. And if it comes back positive, I'm asymptomatic, but would I say I have it, or I'm tested positive? And my experience, so I don't have a habit of being, if I'm sick, I'm sick. If I'm not, I'm not. If I'm sick, don't get other people sick. If I'm not, I don't. So this category of positive, able to transmit, but feeling fine, I don't even have language for. Okay, so and then you multiply this times 1,000, and so I think that's so part of what one of the things I try to do is try to say, where are we as leaders? How can we help with that? And that's where I think the leadership model becomes important. And to me, the one of this is where I'm being clear about. This is what I'm struggling with. I have a hard time. I understand we have to make a decision about the musicians or the worship folks. I see both sides. Okay. And so, I hope everyone, like today, for example, we have our meeting. I'm in a pretty good place, but I'm also concerned about my family. So I'm hoping it's not affecting the way we have our discussion today. I mean, I think my family's fine. I'm not really feeling particularly stressed, but in a session meeting, you've got lots of other things going on. So I think the more we're able to articulate and give voice to in a theological way, the fact that we're anxious or we're stressed or we're uncertain, and that we need to be respectful and loving to each other. Again, that's pretty obvious in a way, but I think the more we can be comfortable with that, that allows other people to be comfortable with that, and that I think that gives a little bit of give and take. My sense is a lot of times, and maybe this is your experience, Dan, too, in the conversation, you get people you're locked into certain things, and you just need a little bit of choose your metaphor, solvent, grease, something to let it loosen things up. And sometimes I think that just candid, I'm having a hard time and I'm really anxious. And I think that helps that liberates others. I think it also varies. The first woman in that position, that may be more challenging, right? Because the expectations may be, for guys and gals, different emotional leadership styles are expected or acceptable, and so I think we each have to find our own pattern. But I think that's why I want to ask you, Sandra, and thanks you for giving me your thoughts. I think the more we're honest with ourselves, the more we can be honest with others, and then the more we can be honest with others, they can be honest with us. Again, it's really simple, but it's a lot of spiritual discipline and practice to get there. Right? Because I want to be the strong pastor. I want to be the one that has the answers. I want to be the one that soothes the anxiety. I want to be the one that calms the waves, walks on the water. Oh, wait, somebody else did that.
Mhm.
Wait, I've seen this before. Right? So, is that making sense? Was that helpful at all? Or okay. And Omar, yeah.
Can I just jump in real
Please.
quick? Because I happen to be on Sandy's session, the session for Rockledge Pres. And I think part of it, this is my own perception, that it's that this tension, this underlying tension is magnified because we can't be together in person. Right now, we aren't meeting in person. And so I think that would be helpful if we could sort of be worshiping and in conversation face to face, because it's really kind of hard. But that's just my perspective. And Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you because I saw your hand raised, but I just wanted to interject for a second on that.
David, did I hear you say that if you're asymptomatic, then you can't infect anyone? Did you say that?
No, I said that my language and my mindset is struggling with that.
Okay.
Because,
I can help you.
Okay, good. What's the right way of saying it?
With my background in infectious disease,
okay.
If you are positive, even if you're asymptomatic, you can still be shedding the virus.
Okay. So my language it's positive and negative language. I'm either positive or negative.
If your test is positive,
okay,
and you're asymptomatic, you can still be shedding the virus.
Right. And so that's why I'm under quarantine self-quarantine until I get the test result. And my thought is, I'm just used to sick and not sick, and I'm using different language. And I appreciate, Michael, you giving us that refinement. I think part of the tension is that from my personal experience, I think for most of us, we understand sick and not sick, as opposed to saying you have the epidemiological background. It just means it's more work. And so for me to imagine that I'm feeling perfectly fine, why do I have to stay home? Well, okay, there are good reasons, right? I'm waiting to get my test back. I'm just saying that's adding to the uncertainty, it adds to the stress, it adds to the difficulty. That making sense? It's just sort of a conceptual, linguistic, I don't even know, it's hard to talk. We're getting used to it, but it's just something that it's an extra layer of complexity, I think. So, Robin, you were going like this, you're saying that we're not getting used to it, or?
Okay, I'm not sure. Robin, did you have your hand raised earlier? It was up, but so I wasn't sure if it was.
No, I probably was messing.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't ignoring you. So.
No, I don't think I'm having a hard time getting used to it. I wake up in the morning and I think everything's fine, and I'll run around and I go, oh, wait, I got to go to the store. Wait, I got to remember my mask, and I want to be in denial because I really want it to just go away and pretend like it never has happened. And I don't like it. It's hard on people. We can't hug each other. But there's no reason for me to just vent all of this. It's just because you guys all know. And it's hard. It's very hard. And we have a wonderful new pastor, and we had a fire in our church, and then all this stuff happened. And it's been a real big challenge. This season has just been tough on us. And so we're here because we want to make sure that we're communicating in a healthy way, and that we keep God's purpose in front of us all the time. And, but as humans, it's not always easy. And our congregation, people in congregations, they're all on different pages. They don't all understand the same way. They're not on the same wavelength. they all have different love language type things going on. And so they have expectations. We need to learn what they are and try to, mold ourselves, I guess. So it's not easy. That's all.
No, thank you, Robin.
If I can add something to that, I think another expectation issue is that I don't pastor in the town in which I live, and in the zip code in which I live, we've had a significant number compared to the town. And when I'm in town, I can really tell that there is a difference, and not just in the number of people wearing masks, but there is just a different attitude towards the whole pandemic, as opposed to where I live. And I kind of live in two worlds, and that's been difficult because if our hospital is full and they haven't had overflow yet, but you definitely feel that this is a pandemic. Walk down the hallway, the IV bags are all outside the rooms, things like that. In the town where I'm at, it's almost as if you don't feel the pandemic. It seems like it's a different world. Maybe this is something happening in New York or Seattle or some other place, but it's not really happening in the town. But that's dangerous because it doesn't take much. And in my opinion, from what I've read, the town remains vulnerable and our population remains vulnerable, and we have to stay alert. But that whole messaging behind how to approach the pandemic has been an issue that's been very hard to get expectations on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and I appreciate the discussion about how hard this is, and for both very different, similar but different circumstances for Robin and Omar. And one of again, talk about sort of that awareness that of articulating where we yourselves are. Robin, you were saying you didn't want to. I forgot what the word you said at the very beginning, complain or something like that. God's people have never complained, right? We always stiff upper lip. Well, no, we read the Psalms. There's so many Psalms of lament, and we're in a period of lament and lamentation and sorrow, and God gives us the voice and gives us the words and gives us the community throughout time to join and lift our voices together. So as appropriate, I think let's use the gift that God has given. We don't often read the Psalms of lament, but wow, what a gift. And in that sense, we can't hug each other, but can we say the Psalms together? Can we, read this, let's get in together on Zoom or on a phone call or do whatever. And I just want to share this with you. I can't hug you, but I'm feeling fine. I know you're not. Here's the psalmist talking about how bones are aching. Thinking of you, right? What are the new forms we have to come up with to respond to the situation? So I think part of it is just that the more we can help people find themselves in Scripture, they see themselves as God's people, and God is at work in the midst. So I just say that would to me be one of the things that I always want to come back to. And so anyway, I just want to appreciate that. I do have to ask, Christina, is that an otter?
It is an otter, my alter ego.
Yeah. Okay. You have been the one to solve the problem. We just need otters. I'm a big fan of otters. Christine, you'll probably agree with me on this. Have you ever seen an otter and not felt better?
I know, right? They just are the cutest little creatures and curious and full of energy, a lot like me.
So goodness of creation, right? Language of the Psalms where God makes Leviathan and God, the image of the Psalm, God said, I think I'll make a whale today. Put it in the water, let it splash around. Let's all watch, right? So that Scripture gives us this joy, this primal sense of God, just seeing the wonder and the goodness of all things, making things and say, yeah, that's really good, 2 thumbs up, and then finally getting to us and going, I'm a little unsure about this Adam and Eve thing. But so we get this joy and we also get the sorrow. And so I think part of good conversation with the community is the foundation we lay emotionally. Be able to say, hey, we are sorrowful together. This hurts. I'm uncertain. I don't know what to do. One community experiences it this way, another community experiences that way. I'm having a hard time, So I think the more we can do that, we give other people permission to say, okay, I'm having a hard time. And that conversation would otherwise is going to get stuck around the me versus you is now, okay, we're both having a hard time. We've just taken a step together. Now, again, it's simple, but I think it's so hard sometimes to be caught up. Michael, were you going to say something? Looks like you.
Yeah, we're a small enough church. We have just under 200 members. But when this whole thing started, after about 3 weeks, we asked our Stephen ministers to divide up the membership and just start calling to see how people were. And by the second round, about 3 weeks later, it was amazing things that they were reporting back. People really missed each other. They really missed seeing each other. And they had a lot of questions about what was going on at the church and so forth. And prior to all of that, you would never know that they were noticing or appreciating, but then the absence really made the heart grow a lot fonder. And so that lets us know that we're not just silent faces in the audience. You know, they're real. They really are putting their heart into it, and they miss it.
But you never would have known that if you didn't have the Stephen ministers having those phone calls.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, you would never have known that if you didn't have the Stephen ministers making those phone
That's
calls.
right. That's right.
A little bit goes a long way, right? The structure, the organization, that people trained in the Stephen ministry program, wonderful, right? And suddenly you've got a sense of longing and love that's coming out. Karen, are you gonna? Karen, were you looking? You're trying to unmute there.
I had gotten kicked off, so I'm just trying to get back on.
Oh, okay. Other thoughts on this line of reflection? It's common that people kind of having that sense of tensions on the one hand and sadness and loss, but also, if I understand you, Michael, correctly, a renewed awareness. Is that happening as well? Of what you mean to each other?
Yes, it was. The response was more visceral than we thought it would be.
With what kinds of just a deep, heartfelt sentiment?
Well, you couldn't get them off the phone. People wanted to talk. They wanted to reach out. They wanted to connect. So we didn't realize just how much connecting we had been doing prior to the pandemic. And you begin to realize the value of the church family.
That's similar for other folks, other congregations and communities? Different experiences or different set of stresses or joys?
We've been doing some calling too. Our elders and deacons have been doing some calling, and I've gotten one of two generally. I either get people who are excited to talk or people who just don't answer the phone and don't return calls. But one thing that has happened that I've enjoyed is some of our people who are not as technologically savvy. They call me sometimes when they're trying to figure out how to access the church online. And so that's something that's happened. At least I know that it's helping some people who wouldn't otherwise be able to watch the service, watch it. So that's been good. And some of them are learning a little bit of technology. It's been kind of sweet.
Are there other things that folks wanted to pick up today? I mean, I'm trying to enter into certain conversations when we kind of reflections when it's a good occasion to do so. Are there other things that returning to that big question toward the beginning, are there other things you wanted to cover that heard the sort of practical things?
I'll add something. Sure. We don't have deacons at our church. So what we did is we did take the congregation and divide it up amongst the elders. so that everybody would get contacts and calls. And then someone asked, well, who's going to do the elders? And I said, well, that's my job. And but I've also been contacting our folks as I can by telephone. And as I've made my way through our directory, I've noticed that our folks are not very technical, not very tech savvy. And so even though we've tried to facilitate and try to present the social media in a way that's very accessible to them through an email, through one of the like Constant Contact or that Chipmonkey one, where you can actually embed a lot of the software, right, the social media right into the email so that they don't have to go looking for it, can just click a button and get it. But even with that, I usually end up at some point of the conversation asking folks, how are you doing accessing the information that's out there? So there's a lot of frustration. There's folks who've been able to do this, and then everyone just feels that, we do miss the in-person worship. We miss being there together with each other. We're currently not worshiping in person, but through virtual. And there is absolutely a missing component that we all feel, that we sort of realize what we're doing right now is really is a shadow of what there was. And we've already, just to echo lament and loss, that definitely is part of what we've had to verbalize or go through or express, that we're trying to put words to what we don't really have words for, this missing piece that we now have to deal with.
Is anyone doing, well, first of all, I'm going to come back to this, just two things, Omar. First of all, so the elders were getting everybody, was getting the congregation, and then you were calling the elders, the ruling elders. Who had you on their list? Who was calling you?
No one. Well, when I talked, I did feel like, I don't think I had anyone call me, maybe one or two calls the entire period so far. But I get a lot out of it when I make a contact with folks, when I talk to people. I always leave feeling ministered to. But I don't think I had a whole lot of folks necessarily reaching out. I've been trying to emphasize old school tech, the telephone. If you can't Zoom, if you can't do those things, we all have a telephone, and you can still go back to connecting using an old school method that still is a voice on the other side of the phone that can be a support.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever seen these things. It's my camera, my computer, my email. You can make phone calls with these too. Pretty amazing. Anyway, so I don't want to give you and your congregation a hard time about no one calling you, but that's one of the kind of the themes that I try to talk about in the book, is sort of just helping the congregation care for the pastor. And you are almost certainly not going to go, why isn't anyone calling me? Right? But maybe in your heart, it'd be nice if somebody called you. Okay. So again, part of that larger relationship between congregation and pastor is who's caring for the pastor, who's thinking about the pastor. And I think in a healthy congregation, whether it's a particular ministry or just people or just a larger awareness, I think that's one of the components where, say, well, who's calling the elders? Well, someone else say, well, you're an elder too. So who's calling you? And I don't want to give everybody a hard time. I think it's a natural, I'm sure this is probably replicated across the presbytery. But that sense that you need care too. You need support too. You need to have someone listen to your lament and grief and sorrow too. We all do. And I think that's again, sort of one of the things I'd like to encourage everyone as a takeaway is if you're a layperson in your congregation, maybe just call your pastor and say, how you doing? And if you're the pastor, I think perfectly fine to bring it up with the session and not to make them feel guilty, say, why isn't anyone calling me? But you can blame it on me. Say, oh, I was at this webinar for the presbytery and they said I needed to do this. And you don't need to do it. You really don't need to do it. You really don't need to call me. So please call me. Right. So if you need someone to do it that way, get some cover, do it. Again, that gives you that opportunity to hear your faithful witness and the struggle as well. That becomes a witness too. Right? The other thing I wanted to say, just curious about that, you're saying that you're looking for the language how to deal with this. I'm curious, is anyone doing a sermon series or on some theme of exile? It's such a powerful, I know that when for Passover, Passover, there was this amazing resonant time for Jews as they looked at the language of Passover and the story of slavery and exile and suffering and disease and sickness and death and they go, oh wow, this is about us today. And it gave them sort of this immediacy. So Passover for many Jews was very powerful. For me, it's that language of exile. We're away from the temple. We've been taken from what we love, our community. Is anyone doing a series on exile at all, or know of one that the congregation is doing?
Yes, I've heard of at least one congregation that has had a sermon series that is based on the idea of the exile.
Okay.
In the wilderness. Wasn't it
Yeah.
Paige
Yeah.
who's preaching on the wilderness? Earlier this year, I preached on the wilderness multiple times.
I thought Church of the Lakes was also doing that.
Maybe.
I did a series on the book of Joel. That huge plague come through with the locusts.
So that was the book about Steve Jobs.
Yeah, that one also. Yeah, so it's a bit similar what the people experienced after the locusts came through and devastated everything, and they were concerned about their economy and everything. And then we need to find out what is God trying to tell us in all of this. So I'm starting now with Ecclesiastes, and that's going to be fantastic. You know, it's all vanity, man.
It's another church then that's doing the exile.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yes, one theological framing. And one of the chapters that I sent you all, and thanks for Sheriff for doing that, talked about sort of theologically framing, and expecting the pastor to help do that and to say, and for me, the way I would understand that in this circumstance, whether it's the book of Job, the Psalms, exile, wandering in the wilderness, we have the stories, we have the experience. God has been through us, God has been through stuff before. And yes, it's new for us, but it's not new for the Almighty. And to me, that's, again, part of what I think can help us. It's just constantly coming back to that larger theological piece and that larger theological framing, which can be a challenge, right? Someone else had their hand. Did someone else have their hand up or was unmuting? Clint? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to derail the conversation you were just having, but Omar, I agree completely with what Omar was saying as far as, you know, picking up the phone, and people need a congregation. They need to worship together. The whole virtual thing is, you know, it's all we got right now, you know, because our church isn't meeting back as a congregation yet. But I've wondered about, you know, I'm up in years, but grew up in the technology world a little bit. You know, it's important that we keep the younger generation, always keeping the younger generations, you know, involved in the church. And, you know, we're starting to see a little bit more interest there because of the technology that we're embracing and doing virtual, you know, church services and things like that. So I was curious to know if anybody else out there is seeing that as well. Nobody?
Yeah. No, I think they're because you're using technology, they're becoming more engaged, or, oh, Sean, you're coming on, it looks like. Go ahead.
I was just going to offer with our congregation, we've noticed that our reach is not just generationally, but as far as geographically no longer limited. So whereas if in person we would have roughly pre-COVID, you know, 250 or whatever, but with more of our integration with online for teachings, we would reach 400 people by the end of the week and see that climb, because we weren't thinking strictly in a four-wall ministry, but beyond the four walls and engaging it that way. And that's completely attributed to the amazing people in our church who click share, and they are willing to share the message because they thought it was worth sharing, and they really believe in what their ministry wants to share with the world. So that's been really an amazing thing that's touched my heart to see how passionate they are about the message that we have at this time.
And we've been seeing the same thing as far as geographically, people out of the state of Florida, going on YouTube and watching, recorded service and things like that. That's kind of encouraging, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Emma's joining us from Nigeria, right? So we got to think about, that's wonderful. So what a wonderful way to think about the body of Christ, both in our four walls and across the globe and in other states in the country. Yeah, it's a reimagining of things. Yeah. Christina, are you going to?
I was just going to say, I was just going to reiterate that, we've gone from being locally centric to really all of our churches, no matter how small they are, have a global impact. So it makes us need to vision and dream and pray bigger than what we were doing 6 months, a year ago, because we do have a greater reach out there.
Mm-hmm. Which is a really biblical image of dreaming and being confident and bold in the midst of suffering. That's very biblical, right? That's that image of we're saying God's with us and God's not being stopped. And, that's a habit. That's a theological habit there that comes, right? That sense of, we're finding ways to see God at work and new technologies, new imaginings. Yeah. Omar, are you going to?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to jump in because this is one of the neat things that I haven't told the story as much, but we had just formed a vision team. And one of the goals that we had was to increase our online presence. And then COVID hit, and I didn't even realize it. But once we got our streaming and everything going, we actually ended up accomplishing that goal, even though we had kind of shut down. And my wife has connections to Brazil. She's got a lot of friends in Brazil. My family's from Costa Rica. And so we actually had, at one point when we were streaming on Facebook, we had folks joining us for our service from Brazil, from actually all the Americas, North America, Central America, and South America. And I thought that was a really neat way that people can now see our sacred music that we have, we have our own unique thing at our church. And here we are sharing it with the world. And I thought that was really a cool thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of our pastors spoke last week. I forget who it was because we do this weekly pastors kind of check in with the presbytery, how they were talking about their snowbirds and how oftentimes when the snowbirds go back up north for the summertime, they disconnect from their Florida church family. But with the new streaming, that they feel connected year round to both churches, they'll have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I'll say one thing, and then I want to take a 5-minute break and everything. So we'll be mindful of our time, but also, what's the phrase Zoom butt? Many of us, we might want to take a 5 minutes just to stretch it. In terms of it's just wonderful to see new ways of thinking and frame. It is a shift that the one that sticks in my mind, and I'm still working on this. I was meeting with a group of students, and so around 18 to 22 or something. And this is a group that I work with, and I had the agenda, I had the to-do list, I had everything on a piece of paper. And I gave each one of them a piece of paper, and we look at it, we go through it together. And at the end, one of them got her phone out and took a picture of it. And I remember thinking, what, you have it. You don't need a digital, you have it. It's on the paper. The paper is the reality. That's what it is. And there is no reality in your thingy, the digits. This is real. And no, that's real for her. What's real is what she has in her phone. And so instead of me saying this feeling of you're rejecting my way of doing things, I realized, no, you have translated into your way of doing things. And I said, okay, good, wonderful, great. I still don't understand it, but I kind of get it. So let's take maybe a 5-minute break, if that's all right, everybody, just stretch or whatever. And we'll just come back about 3:10. That sound good? Go from there? Okay, thanks. And pick up, I guess, and folks may be coming in and out, and that's where we are. And I know folks may have to head out early, and that's fine. So I think we wanted to look at one of these sort of practical suggestions and strategies for how to have the conversations, particularly when it's difficult to have the topics, or so either we're in a stuck place, it's awkward, You got the various things, people taking very personally and those kinds of things. So I think I'd like to start with something very, 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 very practical, and that is theology. And by that, I mean just let's take our theology very seriously for a minute and see the difference it'll make. So, and I think it begins anytime, if I'm going to want to have a good conversation, it's going to begin with me, or I'm going to at least be part of it. So that first step, I have to figure out where I am and how am I relating to another person. So let's take a situation that many of us have probably been in. We need to have a conversation with someone, maybe another member of the session or a church member, and let's just say we don't have the best relationship, right? And we may have locked horns. We may be carrying grudges. We may feel like the other person's carrying grudges. We may have totally messed things up before, and we're feeling incredibly guilty. All of these things are factoring into this conversation that I'm trying so hard to avoid. Okay, and that may seem very familiar to some of you. That sort of how do we, that's very stuck place. And so to me, the theological imperative is always God's call for us to love one another as we have been loved. So just as an exercise, think about someone that you've locked horns with or would have a hard time having a tough conversation with. And then as an exercise, just mental exercise, what would it take for you to love that person? What would it take for you to love that person the way you think either God does or the way you think God wants you to? Now, if you're really stuck, you'll say, well, God doesn't love that person. That person's so bad. Let's assume that God loves that person just as much as God loves us. What would it take for me to love that person? What would it take for me to really do that? And let's just assume I've got all the virtues I need. I've got the strength, I've got the patience, I've got the time. I've got, we don't have to solve this problem. We don't have to have the conversation in the next 5 seconds. So as an exercise, what's it going to take from me to get to the point where I can say, I love this person? Okay? For me, I'll start with one, and then if people want to reflect. For me, I'm going to have to really do that hard work of saying, how have I failed this person? Is that part of the relationship? And I'm going to really want to spend time listening to the person to understand, because let's say I don't understand where you're coming from. You make no sense. This is totally irrational. You've got no evidence or whatever. I've got to spend a long time getting to really listening and asking, help me understand that. Help me understand that. Help me understand that. So when you did that, what other kind of things come to your mind when you stop and do that little mental exercise? What are the things you would have to do to love that person with that kind of depth? Yeah, Robin?
First of all, I'd have to pray,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to ask God to bring things to mind. Just to have Him be able to communicate to me His will and His love. And then you have to kind of make a choice where you prioritize the love over whatever else is there, because we know that love is the greatest of all things. And so to try to figure out how to do that, it's almost like an act of faith, because you can't undo all of the stuff you can't unsay all the words that have been said. You can't take back all the decisions you've made that have hurt somebody. All you can do is go forward. And so step by step, you make choices to help you heal that relationship. And then you try to figure out which step God is leading you to next. It's like eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Other folks, other thoughts on what would need to be or might need to be done?
I'd like to build on what Robin just said. If we ask God for help, we have to realize also that whatever it is you're looking for in another person, that's what you're going to find. And if I'm looking for positive things, help me find those positive things. In fact, help me find those things that remind me of me. And when you do that, then you begin to see that the two of you have a lot in common. And that's a good start.
I use the example of Jesus. I clean out the temple. Get the whip and get him out. No, I'm really kidding you. I think what's important if you have any issues with people is to always start with a question, never a statement. A statement means that you, in a sense, have made a decision or you have a mindset. A question is normally the best way if there's any issue. Help me understand what you see, what you hear, what you experienced. That I think the Lord did also when he was challenged many times, he would respond with a question. So I think that helps a little bit to make the other person feel that at least you will listen. Because many times we want to be heard and we want to make sure that people know how badly we were treated unfairly or whatever the word is. It's irrelevant now. But I think if anybody has really aggravated you, you get this person and say, help me understand. I know that there's some issues that bothers you. And then through questions, you can guide this person to actually hear what you wanted to say without you saying it.
Thank you. Yeah, and when you said you started out with Jesus driving driving them out, the money changers out of the temple, I wasn't sure where you're going with that, and part of me was going,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and part of me was going, are you something like a spiritual metaphor for driving my own sinfulness out of myself first before I mean, like clearing my own the temple of my own heart? I could work with that, right? So yeah, it was a question and answer, and think about how hard that is to ask the question and be willing to listen without cutting off.
You will get used to me. I'm from Africa, South Africa. Our humor is very different.
But think, again, go through that exercise. What would I need to do? As soon as that person, I'd follow Ferdy's advice, and Robin and Michael talk about prayer, ask God for help. And I've asked this question. And as soon as that person starts talking, I know where they're going. I know where they've been from. I know they're wrong. No, I'm being unfaithful once I start doing that, unless I've done this other work, really, as Michael's saying, so, okay, I've got to find myself, see how we're connected. This can be really hard. That's one, but we kind of go through the exercise. We see how hard it is. Where did you have you were going to, okay, sorry. Yeah, Zoom, understanding Zoom dynamics. We got a good number, but it can be hard to figure out where everyone is. Other things we might need to do in this kind of very, very, very difficult moment.
Well, the first thought that came to me was that I agree with Robin that it's going to be a progression of moving through some steps, and that, like, generally speaking, I wouldn't think that you would go from that level of tension and disagreement and dislike to boom, I just love this person. So I kind of think that if from prayer and stuff, that you can lead yourself to the point where you acknowledge that you want to reconcile with this person, and that your main goal is to reconcile, and that hopefully through that process you can get to the point that was being made like by Michael about beginning to see engaging in deeper conversations with each other, listening, strange concept, but actively listening, and then maybe actually being able to arrive to the point where you can fully express your love for that person, acknowledging that God already does and that you're just catching up. So
yeah, I think it's a nice way of putting it, right? God already loves the person. And that's a prayer, and we're called to pray for our enemies, and there's always the temptation to go either, hopefully not directly, but that inner thought of, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for you because you're wrong. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to pray for you. I mean, obviously, that's probably not the right approach. Other thoughts on this? Like how you said, Cheryl, that strange concept called listening. Is that how you phrased it? I mean, listening is hard, right?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How about the times when you just have to agree to disagree? I mean, sometimes you get to that point and you know that you're just always going to be on a different page.
Yeah.
But to say, be able to somehow compartmentalize that piece, like maybe politics, those kinds of things, just, where that there's just always going to be a difference of opinion. And that there are always going to be people who are going to have very specific ideas that are maybe not mainstream at all, maybe not in agreement with a lot of other people in the church, but there are just always going to be people who are going to do, and it's like, God does love those people too. He does. He loves us all. It's just, but it's just part of life.
Yeah.
I don't never pop out on it. It just is.
Yeah. If nothing happened until there was a consensus, nothing would ever happen. Right. And this kind of thing touches on Omar's question about sort of I think that sort of situation you talked about earlier about the sort of people in different places about coming back. How did he phrase that? To come back to worship, or to leave worship. Well, different people being in very different places. There's a phrase that I've heard associated with John Courtney Murray, to achieve disagreement. And by that, I think he meant, I've seen other people use it too, so I'm not sure who gets the credit for it, but by that he meant it's one thing to say, well, we just disagree. It's another thing for us to go, we disagree and here's why. And we disagree. I still believe in my point of view, but I understand why you have your point of view. And particularly around COVID, I might or might agree or disagree about the feeling of safety or personal responsibility or things. But if I hear your concern, I say, okay, I disagree, but I understand it. That you're to say, people weighing the economy versus health. So I'm going to come down one way or the other, one side or the other on that. I may not see it in the same kind of either or, but I can say, all right, that's your priority. Okay. I respect that. Disagree, but I respect. So I think there's a vision. It's part of the healthy relationships have that. I disagree, but I respect it. But that takes work a lot of times, and takes that listening part to say, oh, so that's your priority. That's your real concern. Okay, I disagree. Yeah, Sean, you had a hand?
I think it might be helpful for us as a group, maybe if you could speak to how do you participate in those kind of conversations and be a vehicle for de-escalating when disagreements begin to start to escalate. How do you help proactively de-escalate that situation so you can get back to listening to one another?
I just take one side and badger the other person into submission. Oh, sorry, that's not the right answer. But
John, are you talking about being a third party to a conversation or being one of the conversants?
No, I feel that a lot of the conversation has been surrounding our personal responses as leaders in the church to the challenges that COVID has presented. And there are a lot of different point of views that have escalated. And this one person I've read recently said, COVID didn't change anything. It just put things on steroids and amplified it. So how do we as leaders in conversing with our members and with one another be proactive in de-escalating the emotional level so that we can hear one another and try and communicate and listen? How do we do that?
Yeah, I think the one of the things, that the reason why I put some things about sort of personal self-awareness in the book was just to be to set some foundational reminders. So things like not taking things personally and kind of developing those kind of habits, and being aware of what are our vested interests in any given conversation. So the more, because we're not going to be able to de-escalate if we're already escalated. And the more we are living I would say, sort of a life of prayer without ceasing, which is just a constant awareness of grace and dependence and our own sinfulness. To me, that's how I try to de-escalate, and just, but whatever practices we have to, first of all, make sure we're in a good place, because otherwise it's very easy for us to either make things wrong because we've got a vested interest, or to get triangulated. And so that would be the first step, is where am I? And am I capable of doing that? So assuming that I am, that's where I think the part of, to me, the strategy is to say, okay, you have person A and B, I hear person A saying this, I hear person B saying that. And can you help reframe what A and B are saying such that they can hear each other? Does that make sense? As sort of, as opposed, because, and then kind of do the underlying piece. The other thing that's really, really, really helpful, and I apologize for not having this handy, but it's apropos. And people talk about it in different ways, but it's sometimes called positions and interests. It's kind of different, just want something to listen for and to help other people listen for. So if you imagine imagine just a simple line drawing of a tree with a line for the ground. Okay, so got a tree, the roots are in the ground, the leaves above, and you got a line for the ground. Does that make sense? Okay. Positions and interests is kind of the way that it's just kind of a habit. I think it'd be great to train people in this. Position, what is above ground? What is said? The interest in what's below ground, what can't you see, what's feeding it, right, up through the roots, okay? And helping people to distinguish between that, I think is great for de-escalating conflict, because we usually get caught up in the leaves and the trees and the branches, and then don't get to the interest, the things that are feeding it. So, typical example, someone's really upset about some decision in the physical plant of the church, maybe a new color for the carpet, new carpet color or something like that. And they're angry about everything, the wrong color, blah, blah, blah. It has absolutely nothing to do with the carpet color. It has everything to do with the fact that the person wasn't consulted. They've been on the building and ground committee for 30 years, haven't been able to go to meetings because they've been dealing with stuff, and feel left out, alone, lonely, useless, and uncared for. But are they going to say that? No, they're going to say, doggone it, why'd you choose that color? That was the wrong color. Right? So I think listening for that position and interest, what's that thing that's feeding it underneath, and helping to address that somehow. I think that's a really good way to de-escalate. Because if things are getting intense, it probably has to do less with, what's in the budget line item, and more in the sense of I'm not being listened to, or I'm not being respected, or those kinds of primal feelings. Is that helpful also in terms of a step to take? Yeah. What other people have heard that? I've heard of positions and interests, but that same exercise is used in lots. Other people use it in different terms for that. Above ground, below ground, sometimes. And I think it's useful to do that for ourselves. Again, part of the de-escalating piece, or the how do we love someone? What is it feeding what are my needs that are coming in at this moment? I want reconciliation with this person. I want person A and person B to get along. I need to make it up to person B because I didn't do right by person B's mother. All the things that might go into that are feeding that situation. The more that I can say, all right, the fact that I didn't do right by her mother, that's not relevant right here. I may feel it, but I can't let that be relevant, because I need to be faithful to both, right? So to me, it's that sort of how do you, the self-awareness piece is really helpful for the de-escalation. That makes other thoughts on de-escalation. It happens all the time, and we sometimes need to do it. Other experiences that people would bring forward.
That model is really helpful for me, the tree in the ground. I just wanted you to know.
Oh, thank you.
It's a bit challenging when you realize that there is escalation going on, but you don't know where it's coming from. Where there are all these, what I call parking lot conversations that are going on, and it's feeding into other people, and it shows up a month later in someone brand new when you felt like it had been addressed before. And that's what I'm struggling with how to effectively de-escalate something that I can't get a handle on, that is going on in the background by a few folks that could be it could be any number of causes. And it's not that I do have a sense of love and care for each of the people that I might have disagreements with, that I know about. It's not that, but how to address those background things that seem to be increasing in tension and pressure that I can't seem to get a handle on how to address.
Okay. And I'm going to again sort of ask your help on this, if you don't mind. Whose job is it to do that? And I say that simply because, I say it because I know exactly what you're thinking about. I remember a congregation just like that. And I want to just gently push back a little bit and say, yeah, absolutely, it's probably your job, but it's also, I'm thinking that's a sessional task as well.
And the session has been helpful in the past. I've just come back from a 2-week vacation and had yet another conversation today about these kinds of issues. So, yeah, I hear you in saying that this is something that I need to bring to the attention of the session, and so that we together can work on how to address what's going on in the background that seems to be feeding some unrest.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Sandra. I don't mean to be picking on you too much, but I think that's for pastors. I think it's a habit. We have such a sense of responsibility, but I think it's such a habit that we need to really realize that it's the session as a whole that has responsibility. And so part of the other piece is sort of the theology piece, as they begin with love. The polity piece is all about the session and everything we can do as a session to nurture each other and to assume mutual ministry responsibilities. There are distinctive responsibilities of the pastor or committee chairs, but our common shared responsibilities is what's going to, I think, make all the difference. And the more, even when there's a disagreement, the difference in saying, being able, and I was able to do this with one. I was very grateful for this person. We really, I really saw things very differently in a lot of ways, but I was able to say to her, I really respect the way you care for this, even though I don't prioritize it myself. And back to that point, I think Michael was saying, where can I find that point of connection? Where can I find that? So even with someone that we were always doing this, the more I was able to work with her and say, I really respect this part of what you're bringing, that allowed me to do some more of that work. Okay, we're all work on this together. So other thoughts on that question of sort of how to work with, the parking lot, which I guess, I don't know, where they take place anymore if you don't have the parking lots where people are meeting, but yeah. But other thoughts on parking lot conversations?
Yeah, I think it's important if it happens and you know the names of the people that are somewhat disgruntled, to try to get to them individually, one by one. To say, you know, I sense that you have some issue with something, and again, let them speak. And at the end, you say, but I need your help. It's very important to sort of let them understand that they are part of what you are trying to accomplish, and not to, you know, make them part of your solution. Say, I know these things we may not see eye to eye, but please help me to get through something. And it should be something that's not really that relevant for the person that you're talking to, maybe, but something else. Say, but can you maybe help me get this done, or get this message across, or whatever? But individually, you just need to try and meet with them individually, and not discuss what A said with B. You need to focus just on B. That's on the table, or on A, and the specific person in front of you, I think. That might help.
So you're saying, Freddie, if I hear you, you're saying you focus on the person, listen to what their needs are, address those concerns, but also be thinking, how is it that we're going to take a step together on something? That you're keeping that in your mind.
It's very interesting. We had a session meeting last night, and I was astounded. We have had in-person meetings now for a month or two. Our attendance is very low. That's what we would like. You know, 20 people or 30 shows up or show up. And last night at our session meeting, as we are thinking, so what do we think about this? The young people, three very young, actually two very young persons who are in their early 30s are the ones that are really sort of aggravated by the fact that we are still having in-person worship services. They are part of our worship team, and one is part of our techno team, whatever. And I found it quite interesting, you know, that they were sort of quite adamant about this. And the older folks, they just turned sideways and said, you know, it's okay. And as I left last night, I saw them in the parking lot. So thank you very much. It's just part of this conversation. So when I see them, I will say, you know, I understand that this is very important to you, but help me understand, you know, why did you get so adamant about this? And then try to say, well, you know, you guys grew up in a world that's only technology, but I need to worship with people and serve people that are not that technology savvy, you know, whatever. But individually, I need to have a chat with these folks that I heard last night in our session meeting were really, you know, and all of us were a little bit surprised that they were, you know, no big deal, but I'll have a chat with him. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good example.
The Lord did, you know, clean out the temple. I'm just kidding you.
Now we know where that image comes from. You've been thinking about it since last night. That'd be another good example of what are the things that are feeding what are the things underground that might be feeding that emotion. And if they're in that sort of really riled up position, it could well be just a very, you know, what they're saying. But, you know, that's a good time to think, what are some other issues that are going into this? And I don't know what they are, obviously. I think another strategy that I think is useful when you have these kind of things, when you have a disagreement, and this, whether it's Omar's situation or Ferdy's, where you're discussing something formally, I think a very useful thing that people can do is in a session is you can record, you can ask, let's say if there's a disagreement, you could ask someone, would you like to record that in the minutes? You know, we have a procedure for dissent and those things. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a formal dissent. You don't have to go as a formal level. You can just say, you know, we've decided to do this, but we also want to recognize the fact that several, you know, whether they want their names or not, other session members here want it to be remembered that, or want to express the concern that. And you can it doesn't have to be a formal process. It can be okay, I understand the concern you have about being together in worship. We are deciding to do it, but this is going in our session minutes because we recognize that you are and your thoughts are important. Now, if they're playing to win, they may still be upset, but at least they're being taken seriously. It's no longer a zero-sum game at that point. Rephrasing. Other strategies for dealing with some of these kinds of conversations that you come up and for starting the conversations? And I go back to that when I started with the sense of being naive, and that is a sense of, and I am pathologically conflict averse, so this is really always very hard for me, and I really have to work hard at it. But that's why, to me, I deal with it by just theological expression and just trusting, okay, this is going to be awkward, this is going to be hard, this is going to be awkward, this is going to be hard. But God, you're with it, and you're part of it, and you're going to surprise me. And that's just, that's just my own personal way of approaching some tensions. But I think that awareness for yourself, but how do we individually start the conversations? I know it's really, 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 really hard for me to do that. So I think I would encourage each of us to say, who are the ones that are able to do that? And to, in your congregation, you may have a good session member who is really good at having conversations. Cheryl, you were coming on, I think?
Yeah, I was scrolling through the handout just because I'm kind of curious about the application of the book, like in a group setting. And you mentioned about reading it together with others. And I'm wondering if like the session and the pastor could covenant to read it together, and maybe at the beginning of each session meeting or whatever, have some actual discussions, or if you thought that it was better, like more in like where we would covenant to read it and then maybe come together for a Saturday retreat to lay out expectations, or maybe not lay out, but to discuss with, one another what our real expectations are. Because, like Sandy is new to our congregation, and, there's some things about our church that she doesn't know all about because she's only been here not even a year. So, and then there are so there may be expectations that the congregation in general have that she's not even aware of, because they're not like things that show up on anything the PNC conveys. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to utilize the book to actually enter into that covenantal conversation about expectations.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, let's take a look at that. So the structure again, where is that here? Yeah. Yeah, I think there are a couple. One is I think you've articulated them already, Cheryl. One is let's just say, here. Okay. So this one about church's current purpose, okay? And faithful pastors expect healthy congregations to be clear about the church's current purpose. And it may be that as you looked at the list of things in the appendix, you said, yeah, we really, we keep doing a lot of things we've done, but we're not quite sure why. We just kind of that feeling. So maybe you'd want to just do one of these, focus this one and do it at the beginning of a session meeting with the, again, the quotation, this was just a particular person, help the most in my church having a really frank discussion about who God is to them, what the church is supposed to do. Wow. All right. I mean, he laid it on the line. That's what I love about the work that I did. Just people just were eager to talk. And so maybe it would be just reading this, and you can do it really quickly. You could even do it, ahead of time, or even it's short enough that you could do it. You could have a discussion in the beginning of a session meeting. You could have different people read the voices. Like, hey, Cheryl, would you read Ed? And Bertie, would you read Anne? Right, and just kind of bring that voice into the conversation in the session. Literally bring the voice in, spoken as by whomever. And then that part where you have the assessment piece, you can say, all right, everyone get your pencil and paper out. Don't look at each other's answers, but check it, and then we will compare notes. Okay, and then you'll see, oh, I thought we discussed this. Why didn't you think you said we've never discussed it? Then you've got it starting. So hopefully that structure, if that's something you want to do, And I think it's in this one here. I think this is the other one that has that list at the appendix. Here's the whole set of expectations, right? That you kind of look at this and say, wow, we really want the pastor to empower other leaders. That's where we are right now, because he is just doing it all on his own, and God bless him. You know, that's not what we need, right? You can do it as a singleton piece. Another would be, if you larger piece, I'd like to call the framing part is the beginning. And this was, again, sort of what people were saying. Lots of different principles for understanding the church. And we have our own, our great guidance in the Book of Order. I ended up just choosing these 10 as the things that kept coming up that I thought would be helpful. And kind of more or less, they're not expectations, but they're kind of basic principles. If you have a sense of purpose, you have a sense of what ordination means, you know a covenant, if you have a sense of these, you have mature people that are honest and trust each other, you're going to be doing all right. If you don't have some of these, this is where you're going to be in trouble. So if there's no boundaries, for example, then it's going to be everything else after that is going to be a little harder. So part of it, I would say, assess where you are congregationally. Can you have a conversation with the pastor about not taking everything personally? Okay. And maybe that's a one-on-one. That may not be a sessional discussion. Maybe someone pulling the pastor aside and say, what happened in the session meeting probably really took the wind out of your sails. Don't take it personally. Okay. Or that may be a one-on-one. Or it could also be that your feeling is, wow, the pastor or the committee chair is taking everything personally. Ooh, right? I mean, you have to kind of do that assessment. I'd also like to put do we have any any COM members on now? I mean, Dan is obviously in a leadership role. Other COM? Okay, Christina, yeah. So, COM can, I think, has a role as well. My experience in COM was that we always hated to be involved too late. Much rather to get involved much earlier. Dan, or Christina, you want to say anything about COM's possible support and help with these kinds of things?
Well, one of the things that we try to do, it's one of these, I guess, principles that I kind of think is foundational to COM work, is we try to empower the session to be the session. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the presbytery is being triangulated into a disagreement that we don't need to be drawn into at that point. We need to help them solve their differences, which is one of the reasons why we approached you about doing this. We need groups to have honest sessions, to have honest conversations about expectations, and not be having them, as has been said earlier, in the parking lot. But we stand ready to advise. We'll mediate if we need to. We have sent sometimes teams of 2 or 3 people in to try and reason with situations.
Mm-hmm. And Christina, did you have other things as well, or?
No, not really. I think Dan did a great job. And I echo what you were saying. It's better to involve the presbytery and the COM earlier than later, mm-hmm. if it's a real problem. But at the same time, the session needs to be able to do the work of a session. That's not what we're called to do.
Mm-hmm. The Book of Order prior to 2011 had a little bit of a fuller description about the Committee on Ministry in it, and it had a phrase in there about the Committee on Ministry needs to exercise wise discretion about when to enter into a situation. And we sort of copied that whole section from the former Book of Order into our COM manual, just as a way of reminding ourselves that we have to tread carefully, sometimes tread lightly all the time, when we get involved.
Yeah, because the danger of triangulation is pretty can be pretty awful. And that's, again, sort of one of those things within a congregation to look for. Again, sort of how to have the better conversations, how to encourage, to talk about triangles within a session. Because and how easy, again, do the individual work first? How easy is it for me to be triangulated? Okay, and who is more likely to be able to triangulate me than somebody else? And either because that person's a good triangulator or because I'm susceptible to that person's triangulation, right? If I can do that ahead of time, then I'm better prepared for the meeting. And I'm recognizing that it's like, I want to really please this person and really be the helpful person for this person. Is that fair? Is that the right thing to do? Or am I just meeting my own need? And if I can do that ahead of time, then that's going to be for better session work.
I've had to. The COM does triennial reviews still, which we aren't required by the Book of Order. But I feel like that could be an opportunity if churches took it to engage us in those conversations. And we have found that sometimes churches aren't very honest with the triennial visits. They just want to paint the rosy picture because they think that the presbytery, it appears that they feel like the presbytery is just going to come in and knock boots. But, ultimately, the presbytery staff, there's 3 of us on here, we really care about our churches, our congregations, and the people who worship within them. And so we really want to be a resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because that your desire for the well-being of the congregation comes through so clearly. And that's one of the things that breaks my heart is, there are those who may not fit this description, but basically folks want a great church. They want a healthy presbytery. They want a thriving community. And, somehow we manage to get in our own way. And again, that's back to my naive side, but just trusting that, how can we tap into that person's sense of hope and love, why they're in the congregation in the first place. What is it that's meaningful for them? Tap into that and say, okay, great, how do we get there? Right? Because we do want the same thing. Now, we may disagree on the allocation of resources. That happens all the time. And there are limitations on budgets. But that ability to say, look, we really do love this community, really love this. And even if we have to miss it, or even if we're struggling about whether to meet in person or not, we agree that we love it and we care about it. Let's build that foundation around that and then go from there. So again, that's, to me, it's sometimes very hard because we get locked into certain conversations or certain habits or tendencies. That's why I focus so much on the theology and our own personal work. If I can separate out my own motives, my own needs, really focus on what it takes to love the person in front of me or the congregation or the session meeting. If I can do that work, I think I do a much better job. I can be better prepared to de-escalate. I can be my thinking process is going to be clearer because I'm not, in the back of my mind, I'm not going, how do I get what I want? How do I get what I want? How do I get what I want? I'm going, what's God doing here? And it may be what I want. God may have placed that desire in my heart, and I'm supposed to speak that in this community today. It could also be, I'm a little selfish right now. I need to listen to somebody else and trust that that's why we have the polity that we do, that God speaks through individuals in the session meeting.
Well, David, we are coming up close to the appointed hour. I don't know if you or anybody else has closing comments that they would like to make before we conclude. I'm hearing crickets.
Yeah, I want to say thank you all for being here. I really am grateful. I've not been in congregational setting in a while, and I miss it. I have so much respect for it. I'm called elsewhere right now, and but I know how meaningful it is. Just the simple things of being with someone, and I think of a person. We're just a wonderful person, and has had a little bit of a loss in her life, and just being there in the same sanctuary just before worship, saying, thinking of you. And just realize there's a wonderful gift that we have to be part of each other's lives, and for the good and the bad. And I'm grateful for what you guys do. I'm grateful for you guys being present and thinking about it and taking the time out of your day to think about how to do it better. It's a wonderful world that God blesses us with, and a chance to be together doing God's work doesn't get any better than that, even though it sometimes causes us to pull hair. So thank you all.
Thank you, David. We appreciate you being willing to share of your expertise, and I can't wait to dig into the book and kind of get in the weeds on some of that. And as I mentioned in the chat, we do have 2 copies in the Resource Center, not to dissuade you from buying your own personal copy, but if y'all want to take a look at it, we can provide it. I can mail it to you. Just let me know you want to check it out. All right, well, thank you again. Bravo, David, we appreciate it and all that you've shared with us today. And thanks to all of you for coming. We did record it, and hopefully we'll be able to post it to the website for others to view as well. Thanks for coming, and have a great evening. We appreciate it.